Hello, I'm Dawn Payne, and this is Empowerment TV, where I help you create your dream life and business. Today, I have another really special guest that I'm going to interview. I'm super excited about it. Her name is Deborah Battersby. Deborah is an acclaimed coach, speaker, and best-selling author. She's a passionate explorer in the field of success psychology, personal development, and behavioral transformation. Her global clientele include entrepreneurs and thought leaders committed to excellence for themselves and others. She has helped thousands of people enhance their ability to lead and influence while achieving greater personal success and freedom. Her FreedomPOINT coaching method is touted as groundbreaking and life-transforming. Deborah is certified as a master practitioner in the fields of neurolinguistics, neuroassociative conditioning, and hypnotherapy. She adds extensive studies in spiritual, energetic, and healing arts. She has been a presenting speaker and faculty member for Tony Robbins Leadership Academy for the last 23 years. Well, welcome, Deb. Thank you so much for joining me on Empowerment TV. I know you're a wealth of knowledge, and I can't wait to hear what you have to say and learn a few things.
Well, I'm excited to be here, and it's always fun to hang out with brilliant people, Dawn. So I'm honored to have this time to have conversation with you.
Well, thank you so much. It's an honor for me as well. Let's jump right in. You and I have had some really interesting conversations over the years, and, and recently as well. And one of the things I love about your work is that you see the genius in everyone and what they have sometimes behind what is presented. So I'd love to start with you sharing some of your thoughts on that and your process in that.
I think the more that I explore, the whole personal development genre, the more I realize the genius that is inherent within every human being. And it's not about our education. That's not it. It's some of it is about our experience in life, and obviously education does contribute to that. But the genius is actually the capacity of the subconscious mind, and that we all have this brilliant resource and asset within us that is designed only to help us thrive. But, first and foremost, to survive, that, we're this complex, elaborate organism that its first order of business is to survive. And so because of that, we develop a lot of protective patterns along the way, many of which start out early in infancy and childhood when we have zero control over our own environment. So we learn emotional patterns and behavioral patterns that are designed to keep us safe or allow us to fit in or function in whatever environment we happen to be born into and raised in. So that is the genius that I have been fascinated with exploring for more than 20 years now. And the more I delve into the capacity of this genius, the more blown away I am. And it does not matter who I'm working with or what walk of life they come from or what age they are or what experience they have. I think, in fact, the youngest clients I've ever worked with are probably as early as 10 years old. But there's this genius that we all have, but no one has ever taught us how to access it, or explained how it works, or help us understand that sometimes the things we feel don't feel good at all. In fact, they feel horrible.
Right.
Yet they are still there for our ultimate well-being. But because we don't understand that, we don't know how to apply it, we misinterpret the majority of what we often refer to as negative emotions. We just don't
Mhm.
understand them. We misinterpret them, we judge them, and we do everything we possibly can to pretend they're not there.
Mhm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. That's key.
yeah,
Um, as you were saying that, something popped into my mind that you said to me before. Something about we trust the good
yes,
emotions, but we don't trust the uncomfortable emotions. I,
right.
can you explain that a little bit more? Because
Well,
I
it's
feel
it's
that.
kind of instinctive in a way,
Yeah.
because we always want to move toward what feels good, and good emotions, all kinds of chemistry happens in the body when good emotions are present. There's the endorphins that are going on. There's the dopamine hits from satisfaction of things. There's excitement and adrenaline that occurs. So we have this chemistry going on that gives us a sense of well-being. It gives us a sense of strength or energy or motivation. And, we naturally love the way that feels. And
Right.
on the flip side, when we get to the uncomfortable emotions, they don't feel good. And
Yeah.
so our first instinct is to think this isn't good.
Hmm.
And there's a part of that that's actually true, because that emotion is trying to tell you that something about the circumstance you're in is not good for you. And so
Right.
it's creating some stress or distress in the body to alert you to what's going on. And so but we don't understand that. So
Mhm.
we just think, oh my God, this is not a good feeling. This is bad. It feels bad for me. It makes other people around me feel bad. So it
Yeah.
can't possibly have anything good going on.
Yes. And is that part of how the subconscious is then making, even though we might not understand what it is, but then it comes to the conscious, like, I don't like this feeling,
Yeah.
but we don't necessarily know why. And then we kind of avoid it because we don't want it.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
it's interesting because I bet depending on which research you look at, there is evidence that promotes that the conscious mind can process about 42 to 45 bits of information per second, whereas the conscious mind is more like millions. And regardless of who you listen to, I've had some experts say 2 to 3 million bits of information per second, and I've
Yeah.
heard other experts say up to 42 million bits of information per second. So the subconscious is part of that system, that network of
Mhm.
an antenna that's picking up all the information that is not recognizable to the conscious
Mhm.
mind. You know,
Mhm.
we are sensing, every hair on your body has
Mhm.
an antenna, a sensory component. It's picking up the temperature, the energy, the frequency, uh, it can pick up on things like the darkness in the room, the heaviness of the energy, the anger, the frustration. It's picking up a lot.
Yes.
And some of it is conscious to, our visual experience, our auditory, but
Sure.
more of it is sensory. And so your whole body is a receiver.
Yes.
Conscious mind can't process all that,
It's
but the
too much.
subconscious mind apparently is brilliant at doing so. And
Yes.
because the subconscious is processing everything that's going on, it is determining whether you're safe or not safe. And oftentimes that can be related to past experiences where
Yeah.
the current environment may trigger a reference to past experience. So it activates certain behaviors, certain emotions, certain responses to things.
Yeah.
So, there's so much going on, and we think we know, but there's a part of us that knows so much more than we could possibly comprehend. And that's the part that is always, always protecting you. It's the
Mhm.
part that's always ensuring that whatever the circumstance you're in, that you're protected, that you're safe. And if it means hide, if it means disappear, if it means quiet, be quiet, if it means run, if it means get out, if
Mhm.
whatever it means, it
Yeah.
it will communicate that to you.
So often I mean, there's so much information that comes in, as you said, on the unconscious mind. That's actually incredible that it can process all of that as a protective mechanism, as safety and et cetera. But then does our conscious mind override that? Because we have this ability to override with thoughts. And how does that play into our lives and maybe prevent us from, and I know we don't necessarily need to know what it means, but prevent us from listening to it, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Well, I think the conscious mind can override things because it's learned, you know, and the more we intentionally override certain fears or emotions, the better we get at being able to override.
Right.
But it seems to me that, and this goes back to other research, is that the conscious mind has a finite amount of willpower and a finite
Mm.
amount of energy that it can impose at any given time. Now, this is not my research, and I wish I could quote who it was, but but the reality is when all is going well and you feel like in control, or that you have a lot of certainty in your environment, the conscious mind is freer to override certain things.
Mm.
And when you are kind of flipped into massive uncertainty
Mhm.
or risk or fear or something like that, subconscious takes over completely.
Mm.
Conscious mind it executes whatever the subconscious mind is focused on at the moment. And so it's kind of like, you talk about people who've been in perilous situations, and they were asked, how did you know what to do? And
Mhm.
most of the time there is no thought. It's not like there may be some assessment that goes on very
Right.
quickly, but for
Yeah.
the most part, your unconscious protective mechanisms kick in,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
you are acting intuitively and spontaneously.
Yeah.
So this genius, the subconscious, it is always going to work to protect you as best it can from
Mhm.
real or perceived threats.
Yes.
And the challenge, I guess, with our evolution as human beings is that the threats that we face today are not like the real threats of
Mhm.
thousands and hundreds of thousands and even millions of years ago,
Right.
that we are well protected against the elements in most cases,
Yeah.
unless you happen to be a homeless person living
Yeah.
in some really horrible weather conditions. But most of us are protected from the elements. Most of
Mhm.
us have a secure place to sleep. Most of us have sufficient food. So we don't worry about, am I going to die tomorrow if I don't get food for myself and my family? We
Yeah.
don't have those kind of fears. But yet the genetic disposition to safeguard against fear has evolved to all kinds of manifestations, like, and
Mhm.
and I suppose are still roots in our ancient DNA, that the need to be accepted or the need to be loved
Mm.
is essential to the
Right.
survival of the human organism,
Yes.
because infants cannot fend for themselves,
Yeah.
toddlers cannot.
Mhm.
It's you have to get to a certain age where you can even scrounge for yourself. And so there's this innate need to be
Mhm.
loved and accepted, so as to have that protective social structure around us, whether it's family or friends or whatever. And
Yeah.
so now that fear has morphed into a different kind of fear. Fear of rejection is rampant in our culture.
Yes.
And I was actually having a conversation today with a client, and it was really quite unsettling, because she told me a story about her nephew, who was an extraordinary high school athlete. Junior Olympics, multiple sports that he was proficient in, numerous college scholarship offers. And that this young man had somehow indicated to friends and family that he thought that he might be bisexual. And the family had no concerns about it. They thought, he's a teenager, he's going to, and he'll sort it out, whatever it is for him. And whatever it is, it's going to be right. Well, it turns out that a couple of kids in school, kind of took that information and created some pretty awful social media, Instagram,
Right.
and whatnot, and just bullying and belittling and humiliating and devastating and character assassination and things beyond, beyond your imagination.
Yeah.
Now, the horrible outcome of that is that young man took his life.
Oh my goodness.
Yes. And so, and I bring this up because this fear of rejection, this fear of not fitting in, this fear of not being enough, it has morphed into such a social issue. And that, that young people, not even just young people, but very young people, are learning to use this kind of rejection to bully and really demoralize other young people. And I just find it so heartbreaking that we can let this fear of rejection, this fear of not being enough, be so critical to the lives of, to everyone. It's not just young people, that's for sure, but it seems to be very prolific in that teenage time frame. And it's terrifying, really, because and that it would be so beautiful and so powerful if we could teach young people that those fears of rejection are not are here to actually serve them in a healthy way, not in and certainly if we would be able to teach other people that this form of abuse is devastating beyond beyond character assassination. So I just think there's so many things we need to do to educate people on the pain and the fear that comes with that need to belong and need to protect it, and that it goes back to probably millions of years of DNA. And now we are misusing that in such horrific ways. And that, to help people understand that we can use this information for good or for harm. And our intention is to bring our awareness to this genius so that we can use it for empowerment for ourselves and for others.
Yes. How do things play out? The people who were doing the bullying, how did that play out in terms of why they do it?
I wasn't privy to that part of the story, and I know that it was so devastating for the family of this young man, and that they did not press charges because they didn't want to destroy more lives.
Yeah,
and, which is a pretty noble
it
position
is
to take.
pretty
And,
compassionate. Yeah.
but the interesting thing that evolved from that conversation was that we have to start looking at patterns of abuse.
Mm,
And that if, and I know this is going to sound out in left field and kind of crazy, but we have to understand, where does the pattern of abuse come from?
mhm, mhm,
And if that, and I will share another experience that happened a number of years ago.
mhm,
I was in a class where I was teaching the elements of the work that I do.
mhm.
And there was a man in the class who we were talking about his children and certain behavior patterns. He has 3 children, or at the time, and his youngest was 5 years old.
Mhm.
And that what was really upsetting him, this man, was that
Yeah.
he had no patience with this 5-year-old. He
Mm,
was patient and compassionate and understanding with his older children, but
mhm.
this 5-year-old, every little thing got under his skin, to the point where when he would misbehave, or he'd be too energetic, or he'd be bouncing off the walls, his dad would literally slap him so hard he would go flying across the room. And afterwards, he felt so remorseful,
Mhm,
so ashamed. And
mhm.
yet, and he promised himself, I'll never do that again. I'll never do that again.
Right.
And but it would happen time and again. And so in this class, we started talking about emotional patterns.
Mhm,
And this pattern, and, without going too much into the work I do or how it works, we really helped him tap into the subconscious drive
right.
behind that pattern of abuse.
Mhm.
And as it turned out, he, when he was very young, about 6 years old, his father passed away, and his older brother was charged with taking care of him because his mom
Mm,
had to work. Well, his older brother obviously was devastated by the loss of his dad,
mhm.
and angry about the responsibility that had been placed on him.
Right.
And so every day, almost every day, he would beat up his little brother.
Hmm.
And so the younger brother vowed that he would learn how to take on anybody,
Mm,
regardless of their size. And
mhm.
so as he became a teenager, he would pick out the badass kids in the neighborhood and take them
Right.
down. And it
Oh.
didn't matter if they were, 5, 6 inches taller than him, didn't matter. He said
Mhm.
he would take a running start and jump in the air and kick them in the chest and knock them down and then pummel them. I mean, this was his strategy. So he
Right.
grew up in kind of a rough area,
Yeah.
just so you know the dynamics. But as we explored this pattern of abuse, and the information that came forward is because in the work I'm asking, every single pattern, if it's there for your best interest, if it's there
Mhm.
to help
Mhm.
you survive,
Yes.
and the pattern explained that it taught him how to survive in a very abusive environment.
Mhm.
It also taught him how he could even dominate in
Right.
that kind of environment.
Mhm.
And then it said that, well, and I know this sounds crazy, but as we're communicating with the subconscious and the intention behind the pattern said that his son was just like him, that he
Oh,
was
wow.
small, that
Yeah.
he was going to be picked on, and that he needed to be
Huh.
tough. He needed to get strong.
Yeah.
So the pattern said, I came to make him strong so that he could manage in the world, so that he could be strong enough to stand up to whatever challenge came to him. And I
Right.
thought, I was like blown
Oh,
away.
yeah.
Like chills throughout my whole body, and the whole
Yeah.
audience is in tears because he's sobbing because
Yes.
he didn't understand. He had no idea why he was perpetuating this behavior. And
Yes.
the subconscious shared with him that, look, you went through a rough time. You were small in stature, easy to pick on. He's the
Yeah.
same way.
Mm,
I protected you. Now I will protect him.
right.
And is that like you go, is that even possible? But then,
Yeah.
once that realization occurred,
Hmm.
we were actually able to then dialogue with the subconscious
Hmm.
to ask different questions. Is
Hmm.
he growing up in the same environment as his father?
Hmm.
The answer was no. Has he been, has he been beaten or bullied, in his
Yeah.
life? And the answer is no. And is this the kind of behavior that is really going to serve him long term? And the
Hmm.
answer was no. And so in dialoguing with the subconscious, we're asking, okay, what's another strategy that this father could use to
Hmm.
help him son become strong? Because that was the
Right.
intention, make
Yes.
him strong. And so, several things came up in the process,
Hmm.
but that there were other things that the father could do. The
Hmm.
father could introduce him to martial arts, that
Yes.
the father could introduce him to trainings and disciplines that would give him his physical capacity and his emotional capacity the
Yes.
opportunity to develop together. And
Yes.
so, and the most beautiful thing about this happened more slightly over 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And I had the opportunity, the father reached out to me it was about less than a year ago, but he had reached out to me on a video call with his son, who was now,
Mm.
I think, 16 years old.
Yeah.
And his dad had explained to him what happened in this course and this experience. And
Yes.
and the son just said to me, I just want to thank you for helping my dad be the
Oh my
best
gosh.
dad in the world.
He had the best intentions in the subconscious to help his son have the
His son.
survival, the
Yes,
ability to survive.
yes.
And it's so interesting
And
to step it back.
and the most amazing thing about that is, in our society, we talk a lot about abuse, spousal
Mhm.
abuse and
Yeah.
abuse of children, and, even bullying in the workplace and bullying in school and things like that.
Mhm.
And what I think we don't address enough is
Mhm.
the abuser. What
Mhm.
is the
Yeah.
behavioral pattern of the abuser and what
Yes.
needs to shift? Because there is some subconscious programming that
Mhm.
could be based on their own upbringing.
Yes.
It also could be based on the upbringing of their parents or even grandparents. Because
Yeah.
what I've discovered, and again, I am not a scientist, so please, take this with a grain of salt, but having done thousands of these sessions,
Yes.
oftentimes in communicating with these subconscious patterns,
Mhm.
I find that they are inherited patterns, that they go back many generations,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
that, because it happens in frequently enough, that
Mhm.
I trust it, because I
Yeah.
just trust the genius of the subconscious to offer up whatever wisdom it has.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so, this work has just led me to asking a lot of different kind of questions in how we can
Yes.
understand behaviors in a way that can give credibility to the behavior in terms of its original intention, but
Mm-hmm.
also then negotiate a modified strategy that is
Yes.
healthier for, that person.
Mm-hmm. Taking the intention of what the subconscious was doing and using a different strategy to then serve
Absolutely.
that themselves and or the other
Yes.
people in their lives.
And so the
Yeah.
original pattern with that man was
Mm-hmm.
fear, and the fear
Right.
of not being able to protect himself, and the strategy to become the aggressor, to
Yes.
be, I'm not going to be bullied. I'm going to become the bully.
I'm going to do it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then I'm safe.
Yes, exactly. This
Yeah.
is how I protect me. And
Yeah.
now this is how I'm going to protect my son, whether
Mm-hmm.
I know this consciously or ever thought it for a moment.
Yes.
That's what's going on.
Yes. And, huge credit to the man who wanted to take a look at that,
Yeah,
because not everybody does, because we run these patterns.
sure.
We don't necessarily understand why. And, as we started this conversation, we feel good. We just want to go to the good ones. We don't
Yeah.
always want to investigate what feels bad,
No,
because we have to
no.
go into it and
Well,
maybe
and
feel a little more to get the
exactly.
answer.
Well,
Yeah.
and the thing about it is, if we experience these uncomfortable, and we call them negative emotions. I don't like to use the word negative emotions, because to
Yeah.
me, they're intelligence. They're intelligent
Mhm.
emotions that have a job to do. And
Mhm.
so, but because they feel bad, and because we socially judge them as inappropriate,
Yes.
that we think we're broken. You know,
Right.
I'm perpetuating this behavior. I have an addiction. I have
Right.
of any kind. I don't care what it is.
Uh-huh.
I have an addiction to food. I have an addiction to television. I have addiction to my technology. I have addiction to
Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
And some of us have an addiction to work because it's a whole lot more socially acceptable. But
Yes.
the reality is that we all have this fear that we're broken because
Mhm.
we have been taught to judge these emotions and
Mhm.
and consequential behavior patterns as
Mhm.
flawed, as
Right.
unacceptable,
Right.
inappropriate. So we get
Mhm.
this thought that we're broken.
Yeah.
So I just want to help people realize that
Mhm.
we are not broken.
Mhm.
We are genius beyond
Mhm.
comprehension.
Mhm.
And if we are taught or introduced to how to work with that genius,
Mhm.
we can solve so many of our own, um, you know, and I don't like to even use the word destructive, but limiting patterns.
Mhm.
We can resolve some of our own limitations and realize that we're not broken. We're just
Mhm.
running a program that was established, probably maybe even in a previous generation. We're
Right.
running a program that's designed to protect us. And the more we run it, the more compounding there is to the downside of that.
Right.
And so we get to the point where the downside of that pattern, that emotional
Mhm.
program,
Yeah.
becomes so intense that we don't know what to do with it. We don't know how to
Yeah.
manage it, and
Yeah.
we try to medicate, sedate, escape,
Mhm.
disassociate. We
Mhm.
we try to find all kinds of coping mechanisms to deal with
Mhm.
it.
Mhm.
When the most beautiful thing we can do is to connect with that program, that emotional structure,
Mhm.
and to learn the original intention behind it.
Yeah.
And how can we preserve the original upside and then
Yes.
mitigate or eliminate all of the downside. Because the truth is, when those patterns are initiated, they are initiated to be expedient in the moment. Solve the problem. Don't think about the consequences, because the
Right.
consequences don't occur until the pattern becomes chronic or consistent.
Right.
And
Yeah.
I guess the one thing I have discovered about this genius of the subconscious, that it will continue to perpetuate a protective pattern long after it's no longer needed. It's kind of like,
Oh, wow.
think of it like software, you know?
Yes.
It's kind of like it's in the software. The software's in the system and it's gonna run.
It's just
It's
gonna keep going.
just
Yeah.
gonna run until you change the software.
Right.
And so the subconscious goes, look, I did my job. I protected you. This is a brilliant strategy. Go for it. And so we keep collecting these brilliant protection patterns, and they plug them in and they keep running.
And they work well.
And they work well to a point.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so, and the beautiful thing about, I guess, the subconscious, it doesn't really contemplate consequences. What happens if I run that pattern too long? What if I use anger all the freaking time? What if I use it in inappropriate moments? What if I use it with my infant children and my colleagues and my clients? What if I use that with my spouse? The anger is a powerful emotion.
Yeah.
It has tremendous energy, so it creates a lot of fuel in the body.
Yes.
But anger as the go-to, we talk about anger management all the time, but that's because anger has been the solution to so many challenges throughout life.
Yes.
And so we just assume I'm an angry person, which is not true.
It's not who you are.
No, it just happens to be some software that got plugged in a long time ago.
Right.
And it's going to run until there's a recognition of the unintended consequences.
Yes.
And then there's an opportunity to reorganize the software. And literally, the subconscious is brilliant at that, because it has no time-space limitations. It can delete a program in a heartbeat once there's an agreement. It can modify a program by changing a strategy, preserve the intention, change the strategy. So it's kind of like upgrading a glitch in a program, like your software. You get these updates all the time. It says, your iPhone now has an update available to handle this particular issue. And it doesn't mean it doesn't create other issues, but hey, we've got an upgrade for you.
You're upgrading it still,
So the subconscious has the capacity to do that too. And what I've learned in the last couple of years that I found extremely fascinating is that the subconscious actually has the capacity to gather and install new programs.
It's amazing.
It blew my mind the first time I tried it, and I thought, oh my God, this really works. And, it kind of, I have a scientific perspective on the most rudimentary level, because things need to make sense to me from, just the basic premise. And that's why I absolutely love the whole idea of quantum mechanics, quantum theory, because it breaks everything down. I remember back in science in fifth grade or something, you learned that energy cannot be created or destroyed, but it can be transformed, transmuted. But quantum theory just tells us that everything in existence is energy, everything, and that the frequency of the energy determines what elements coalesce, what things attract. If this computer is vibrating at, I don't know how many gazillion megahertz per second, that whatever's holding it together, that energy and vibration or vibration or frequency holds the energy together. So you figure, okay, if everything that exists is nothing more than energy and information, that
Yeah.
includes us.
Right.
And that also includes the sounds you make, the thoughts you think, everything you experience is also energy and information. And
Yeah.
so it occurred to me that has to be true of our emotions as well. Energy, information. And so I figured if I could approach it from that perspective, I want to know what is the information behind that energy. And the energy, we label it with a feeling based on how it presents, physiologically. And so
Yeah.
I'm going, okay. So this is how I guess my curiosity began.
Yeah.
Because if it's energy and information, then what can we learn from that? And so that's kind of how my work evolved. It just wondering, how do we connect with that energy, and how do we actually find the information behind it? What is it? Because everything is a frequency of sound or light.
Yes.
And so I just had to figure out, how does that apply to us as human beings, and how does that apply to our own emotions? And from that, I surmised that, the emotions that we experience are an internal guidance, that they're that somehow we can all experience the same thing and have a different emotional impact from it.
Yeah.
And so it's our interpretation of what's going on, and then how it's processed through us determines what's the emotion that we're going to experience. So I figured, okay, then maybe it works something like a GPS, that it surveys the environment, and creates certain reactions in the body. You experience a certain emotion, and that emotion is intended to guide you in a specific direction. So toward survival, toward protection, toward thriving, toward growth, toward excitement, that it has a direction for you. And so, I figure, okay, so we have this brilliant subconscious mind, and we have this amazing internal communication system.
Yes.
And that communicates to us through emotion. And I just figured, if there is such a thing as this internal communication system, then is it likely that that system would be flawless? And I come to that conclusion because, if you look at every single system in the human body, the respiratory system, the endocrine system, the digestive system, the elimination system, the lymphatic system, and on and on and on and on. And that those systems are perfect unless they have been impacted by some trauma.
Right.
And I have not heard of any scientific research that has been able to improve on one of those systems.
Right.
So as far as our evolution is concerned, as human beings, these systems are flawless.
Right.
So with that conclusion, then why wouldn't the internal communication system be flawless? And so from those two conclusions came the whole impetus of my work.
And we don't even know they're running.
No.
Like, we don't feel our liver, we don't feel our, like, I mean, there might be some things if we bring our awareness to it, but we don't even know what our body's doing or what the
Yeah.
consciously feel what it's doing. Most
Unless unless you have pain, you don't know.
exactly,
And
which is
half the time you could have, you could have malfunctions in these systems for a long
yes,
time and never even know it, because
yes,
the body is brilliant at compensating.
yes,
And so, but once you do know that there's a challenge, there are ways to intervene in the system to create healing. And
yes.
so, from that standpoint, it's like, well, how can we intervene with this communication system? And
Hmm.
my experience is that the only way I've figured it out is through tapping into the body and tapping into the subconscious,
Hmm.
you know?
Share a little more. We talked about this a little bit and just kind of connect the dots for me in terms of how we can call in the energy from the quantum
Mm,
to, like, for love or certainty, or like the things that we're actually craving, which you'd mentioned before, like part of the fear of rejection is that we're not going to be loved,
right.
or the certainty or safety. Can you talk a little bit about that? Like, I'm still wrapping my mind around all of it, but we talked about
Yeah.
that a little bit.
Well, it's kind of like the like it's like the icing on the cake. It's
Hmm.
kind of like once you understand and can trust the system, once
Mm-hmm.
you really learn that this system is here for your ultimate good,
Yeah.
then, I will, when people are having certain emotional experiences, whether it's stress or anxiety or worry or fear, as we kind of go into a light meditation or a light trance,
Hmm.
what I'll ask them to do is identify where in the body this emotion is present. Where does it live in the body?
Hmm.
And I I'd say 99.9% of the time,
Hmm.
people are very readily able to
Hmm.
identify where it is in the body. I remember one time I was working with a young woman who was concerned about getting pregnant. And so there was, and she was frustrated. And so when we were kind of into our trance work, and I asked, okay, as you scan the body, where, if anywhere, inside or outside the body, is this information called frustration?
Hmm.
And I knew that the system was brilliant right then and there, because it said, because her answer was in the upper left quadrant of the right ovary.
Oh my gosh.
And I almost burst out laughing, because I thought, oh my God, that is specific.
That
And,
is clear. Yeah.
and so sometimes it'll be very generalized. Like sometimes you feel it in the whole body. Sometimes it's in
Hmm.
the chest. Sometimes it's in the head. Sometimes
Yeah.
the information is actually outside of the body, but you can feel its presence.
Yes.
Information that's, like weighing down on your shoulders or pushing you from behind, or like your
Yeah.
feet are stuck in concrete. It's
Yeah.
amazing what people
Yes.
express in these sessions.
Hmm.
But I also remember, and this happened just a couple of years ago, and I've because one of the antidotes to the pattern that was running was this fear of rejection. And so I said, what if anything would
Hmm.
resolve that issue? And
Hmm.
what the subconscious offered up was self-love. And so
Hmm.
I asked her to, look, scanning the body, where, if anywhere, inside or outside, is self-love. And she
Hmm.
couldn't find it,
Mm.
could not find it anywhere.
Hmm.
And I said, okay, let's look, as you scan this time, look
Yeah.
outside the body,
Hmm.
just scan outside the body.
Yeah.
Is it in front of you? Is it to the left, to the right? Is behind you, below you, above you? Scan, do a 360 scan and tell me where, if anywhere, is self-love.
Yeah.
She said, I can't find it. And I said, look really far away.
Mm.
Look beyond the horizon.
Wow.
Look, just expand your scan to, beyond the atmosphere.
Right.
And she found it, and it was near the
Amazing.
sun. And so I said, okay, so just take a gentle breath and draw it closer. And so we did that about 5 or 6 times, each time drawing it closer until it was right in front of her. And then I said, is there any resistance to inviting it in? And the answer was no. And so with the next breath, she was able to draw in that frequency, that energy of self-love. And her experience from that was so extraordinary. And, and it was really crazy because she was going through a very bitter divorce at the time, and felt, helpless on one end, but defiant on the other, and but not sure about what she deserved and what she wanted. And from a place of self-love, things shifted so dramatically in terms of her own sense of self, her own comfort with asking for what she wanted, but also a different sense of fairness. She didn't feel like a victim anymore, but she didn't really want to punish her soon-to-be ex either. So she came into the rest of this process from such a whole place that it was a much better outcome than she had anticipated. So that's just one example of, and so I realized that oftentimes the things that we feel lacking in, we have pushed so far away, or that somehow our ancestors have pushed so far away because it was perceived at some time as not being safe. To love yourself is arrogant, selfish, self-centered, you name it. There's a million reasons why that would be shunned or banned, depending on, oh my God, depending on social norms, religious expectations, environments of which you're growing up, particularly for women. And I will tell you that women experience this more than men, because if you look at the genetic history of women, the DNA, women were property up until a few hundred years ago. And so that sense of self had to be completely negated. And so, for for us as women, and it doesn't matter your gender preference or anything. It's just the genetic conditioning that goes back thousands upon thousands of years. And so at least that's my theory on this, And how do I prove any of this? I just kind of put together the pieces of the puzzle. It's kind of like, oh, okay, between the wisdom that the subconscious shares with me and, historical perspectives, it's just like trying to put the pieces of the puzzle together. So I cannot assume that all of my perspectives are, completely accurate. And I'm always testing them in communication, in doing the work. Does this validate? Because if something doesn't validate time and time again, then I will exclude it.
And it's
So,
all an evolution, you know,
yeah.
as you understand, as we understand, as more information comes out, then things can be tweaked or understood more or developed a little deeper, and
And
we progress.
explored
Yeah.
more intentionally,
Yes.
that we don't immediately label something as broken or flawed or inappropriate, that we actually
Mhm.
start to explore, because there is genius in all of it.
I
And
love it.
that is, and if we understood that, we could get a much better
Mhm.
handle on so many of the social issues that we face.
Yeah. If there's just one takeaway for anyone listening or watching,
Oh my
just
God.
knowing that we are all genius in our own way. It's just understanding where and what, and even if we don't fully understand, just knowing
Yeah.
that we're perfection in the way we
You know,
are.
I think part of it is just recognizing that the system, the
Mhm.
organism, is more flawless than you know.
Yeah.
And that somehow or other, everything we experience emotionally
Hmm.
is in some way here to serve and guide us, not
Hmm.
anybody else.
Yeah.
You're, and by the way, whatever you're feeling, it's real. Don't pretend it isn't, and don't
Yes.
deny it or shut it down. Own
Yeah.
it, embrace it, because the moment you do
Hmm.
and you trust it,
Yeah.
that this is here for my benefit,
Yes.
regardless of how uncomfortable it feels.
Yeah.
If this is here for my benefit, then I can
Yeah.
get curious. And
Yes.
the way I do that personally, and I find it's most effective when your conscious mind is slowing down and
Mm.
getting ready to check
Mhm.
out.
Right.
So this is most effective in meditation,
Hmm.
most effective when you're drifting off to sleep, or when you're first waking up, before that beta mind takes over.
For
You
it's
know,
busy. Yeah.
it gets busy, figuring out everything that's going to happen in the next
Yeah.
24 hours. But
Yeah.
so from that, and I'll share just one personal story if we have time.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And that is, this would happen a number of years ago, and it was kind of in the very early stages of my exploration of this work. And I was crawling into bed like at 4 a.m. and we were at an event, and you know what I'm talking about. Yeah.
I know what we're talking about.
We're
Yeah.
talking about outrageous demands on your time and physicality. So I'm crawling into bed at 4 a.m. and I'm thinking, oh my God, I have so much pain in my lower back. And as I'm starting to drift off, I'm just trying to settle in so I can go to sleep. And I thought, I'm going to talk to this pain.
Hmm.
Okay. And so it works on the same premise as the emotions, because I've learned that every physical pain has an emotional construct attached
It
to it.
does. Yeah.
It definitely does.
Yeah.
And so in your work, my God, you know that.
I see it all the
So,
time. Yeah.
so I'm drifting in, and I'm going, okay, what are you? Tell
Mhm.
me, what are you? And I think there was 2 or 3 things that came to mind, and I thought, no, that's not it. And then the thought came, I am the feeling of unsupported.
Mm.
And tears started to trickle
Yeah.
down my face, or down the sides.
As you're laying on your back. Yeah.
As I'm laying on my back.
Yeah.
And so I thought, okay, that's it, because there's an emotional component that came with that.
Hmm.
And I thought, that's crazy.
Hmm.
I have all kinds of support.
Mm.
I have a very supportive husband and family. I
Mhm.
have a great business team behind me. I have all
Mhm.
kinds of support. And
Yeah.
then I thought to myself, that's my conscious mind, right? This is
Right.
my
Yeah.
conscious
Yeah.
mind butting in.
Yeah.
And because
Button in. Yeah.
it didn't seem logical to me at all.
Yeah.
And then I remember saying to myself, shut up and trust the process.
You're
And
like,
so,
I hate it when
because
it
I'm
happens.
exploring,
Take my own
right?
advice. Yeah.
So shut up and trust the process.
Yeah.
And so I asked, how long have you been here? And it said, since early childhood. And I
Oh,
said, okay. And so part of the dialogue is, if it's true that you're here to serve me,
mm-hmm.
what is your job? And the
Mm-hmm.
craziest things came. And you'll know when the thoughts that come are not things you've thought of before,
Mm-hmm.
or when they come in a dialogue that you don't normally use, if they
Right.
use words that aren't common to you.
Yeah.
And so the answer was, I came to give you backbone. I came to give
Holy
you
smokes.
I came to give you the strength to stand up for what you believe in.
Yeah.
I came to give you the strength to stand up for those who cannot stand up for themselves. And all of us, and these tears are rushing. And I'm
Yeah.
going, oh my God.
Mm-hmm.
And so then I asked the question, is your mission complete? Do I have enough backbone?
Mm-hmm.
And the answer was yes. And so then I asked, is it okay for you to go now? And that pain in that location in my lower back has
Mm-hmm.
never returned.
It's amazing.
I know. And these aren't the
So
kind of
cool.
claims I make for people. And
Yeah.
I can just validate that
Mm-hmm.
people have had incredible experiences,
Mm-hmm.
particularly around pain issues,
Mm-hmm.
when the emotional intention is received
Yeah.
and then accepted, because
Yeah.
then the job is done.
Yes.
And so, and I can't tell you that happens every time, but it
Yeah.
always blows my mind when things like that happened.
Mm-hmm.
And so from that, I would just say, accept what you're feeling.
Mm-hmm.
Don't push it away. Don't
Mm-hmm.
try to hide it. Don't judge it, for God's sakes, because that's really how we cripple ourselves, is we
Yeah.
judge what we're feeling as being
Yeah.
wrong.
And
And
it's not. Yeah.
so embrace it. And
Mm-hmm.
then, like I said, when you're in that meditative state, begin the dialogue.
Yeah.
It's, why are you here?
Yeah.
How long have you been here? What are you trying to do for me? What are you trying to show me?
Yeah.
And sometimes, and I can't say that it works every time when I do it for myself, because
Yeah.
again, the conscious mind wants
Yeah.
to butt in and run the show. And
Yeah.
that's why I highly recommend that, if you have issues that you're really struggling with, you might want to reach out and find a practitioner
Yeah.
who does similar work or this
Mhm.
kind of work.
Yeah.
Also, I did want to suggest on that
Yeah.
in my book, there is a self-guided, yes, exactly.
This
There's a
book. Yeah.
That's it. There's a self-guided journaling structure on
Yeah.
how to take yourself through the process.
Yeah. I love it. Mm-hmm.
Fantastic.
And some great examples too.
Yes. And
Yes.
so
Yeah.
does that about cover it? Is there anything else I can share with you?
I think it's absolutely incredible, the work you do. And I've experienced it and feel very grateful for that. And I still use it to this day in terms of the understanding of what I'm going through. And I would love for you to share how people can reach you if they do want to speak to you or work with you directly, to enhance what they've learned today or whatever they learned in the book. So where can they get the book if they want to do
Or
some
Amazon,
self-directed?
Amazon is, I don't promote it myself, so it's just
Yeah,
available on Amazon, and it is called FreedomPOINT.
yeah,
Deborah Battersby. So it's
yeah.
heal your heart, live your potential, transform your life. So I hope for those of you that do, decide to acquire that you have a magical experience with it. And
Yes.
as far as, reaching out to me personally, Deb at successmatrix.com is probably the best way to get a hold of me.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I learned new things today. I'm going to re-listen to this. Take away a few more nuggets.
I am so
grateful.
delighted and appreciate the opportunity, and truly that I hope that something that we shared today is going to have a really beautiful impact for your listeners.
Yes, I know it will. Thanks again, Deb.
You're very welcome, Dawn. I'll see you soon.
You bet. Take care.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you for joining us for Empowerment TV. Please like it and share it with someone who might need to hear this information. Deb is just the most amazing person, and I'm so grateful that you got to hear a little bit of her insights and wisdom. And remember, keep believing in yourself and keep believing in your dreams. You have everything it takes to make them all happen. I'll see you next time.